Hi, welcome to Ms. Richardson's U.S. History 5-Minute Lectures. This information will be U.S. Notes 5.1, Background to the Civil Rights Movement. It includes information that aligns with the first section on your study guide. Remember, you control the lecture, so pause whenever you need to, write down any questions you have, rewatch if you need, and make sure you're using your study guide to help you take the notes and know what's important. Let's go ahead and get started. The Civil Rights Movement did not just start suddenly in the 1950s. There were many earlier actions, individuals, and events that led to the movement, and in these notes I'll just cover a few of them. These early actions and people helped to shape American history and society and really paved the way for the Civil Rights Movement when it exploded in the 50s and 60s. First, there were early individuals who pushed for equality, better treatment, and changes to society. You may even remember some of these people that we talked about last semester. W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, and Marcus Garvey all wanted better lives for African Americans. But remember, they had very different ideas about how to gain these better lives. Remember, they were early progressives. We talked about them in the very first unit. So Weber, W.E.B. Du Bois, wanted social and political equality. So that's what he was looking for, political and social equality. And he believed that education would lead to political equality. So he really thought that being educated meant you'd be involved, you'd have leadership in the government, and eventually that would become social equality with changes to politics and laws. Much of the early civil rights movement is based off of that idea that equal social and educational opportunities will lead eventually to equality and complete equality. While Du Bois fought for these ideas in the early 1900s, others were also fighting the same fight. In 1905, the Niagara Movement began, and Du Bois was a founder of this. It was an interracial group that means that both blacks and whites were members. All of the members, black and white, were fighting for civil rights. It's one of the earliest examples of a civil rights group in the U.S. Then in 1909, the NAACP, or National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, was founded. They fought and continue to fight for fair and equal treatment of minorities through the court system and court cases. They fund lawyers and court cases to try to force changes in the laws that are unfair, so to get rid of those discrimination laws. They're still around today. Also in the 20s, we had those African Americans gaining prominence through the Harlem Renaissance. Their art, music, and writings gained mainstream popularity. That led to more acceptance by a wider group in America. Not all Americans felt this way, but more and more white Americans were becoming familiar with Black America. And so that was a step towards the civil rights movement. Adding to that, and more blacks into national culture and pride, in 1936, at the height of Hitler's reign, African-American runner Jesse Owens won 4 Olympic gold medals in Berlin, Germany. All of America cheered as he beat Hitler's Aryan Nazi runners. So that was huge. And a few years later, in 1947, baseball was desegregated by Jackie Robinson. That year, he played his first game for the Brooklyn Dodgers and was named Rookie of the Year. In 1948, President Truman then desegregated the military by executive order. See, some of this stuff we've already talked about. And just a few years later, that was tested in combat in the Korean War. And America saw that blacks and whites could successfully work next to each other in combat. So why couldn't they do that in other places? And as you know from the last set of notes, in the 1950s, white teenagers became enthralled with this whole black music, rock and roll. Integrated concerts, black musicians, dancing, this whole culture of rock and roll helped spur the civil rights movement, and we're going to look at the actual civil rights movement in the next several sets of notes. So this is the end of notes 5.1. Hopefully you learned something, and I'll see you in class with any questions you have.